Some people are born into storms, but others are assigned to storms. And the moment you stepped into that relationship, into that friendship, into that workplace, something shifted. You didn't realize it then, but you were walking into a battlefield where the war was not between you and them, but between purpose and destruction, between light and manipulation, between the assignment on your life and the opposition of a narcissist control. God didn't put you there to break you, He put you there to build you. Let that sink in, because when you're dealing with a narcissist, every day can feel like walking on glass. Their charm hooks you, their manipulation keeps you, and their cruelty confuses you. You keep asking God, why me? Why would you allow this? But you've been asking the wrong question. It's not, why did this happen to me? It's, why did God choose me to walk into that fire and come out without the smell of smoke? Being in the life of a narcissist wasn't punishment, it was preparation. That's a truth most people don't want to hear when they're still bleeding. When you're living in the fog of confusion, walking on eggshells and trying to figure out how love turned into pain, it's hard to see how anything good could come out of it. But that's how God works. He allows us to sit in fire, not because He wants to burn us, but because He wants to refine us. The moments that seemed like the end of you were actually the birthplace of something new inside you. God didn't put you in the narcissist's life to watch you suffer. He placed you there to awaken the strength that had been lying dormant inside of you for far too long. Narcissists are masters of illusion. They use charm as bait and control as their weapon. They twist your words, deny your reality, and make you question your worth. But underneath all that manipulation, something unexpected happens. You begin to change. Not in the way they wanted, not into a puppet or an echo of their ego, but into someone unshakable. It doesn't happen overnight. At first you shrink, you silence yourself, you try to fix things, to keep the peace, to be enough. But the more you try, the more you realize the game is rigged. You were never meant to win. And that's when something inside you snaps, not in a way that breaks you, but in a way that wakes you up. You start to realize your voice matters, that your feelings are valid, that your intuition isn't lying. You start to remember who you were before their manipulation made you forget. And even though it hurts, you begin to rebuild. You get stronger, you learn how to say no. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop pouring your love into someone who only knows how to consume it. You finally see that peace is more important than being liked, and freedom is more valuable than familiarity. This transformation didn't happen in a classroom, it happened in the furnace. God used the narcissist as a tool not to destroy you, but to develop you. Because purpose requires pressure, and your future needed you to become someone who could walk in wisdom, carry discernment, and know your worth without needing someone else to confirm it. That kind of strength doesn't come easy. It's earned through every tear you cried alone, every silent prayer you whispered when no one else understood, every boundary you set that made people call you difficult instead of healthy. All of that pain became training. God was not silent in your suffering. He was shaping you. He was preparing you for the people you'd help one day, the lives you'd touch, the wisdom you'd carry. You couldn't get that kind of insight without walking through the storm. And while the narcissists thought they were breaking you down, God was building something unshakable within you, something that couldn't be controlled, something that couldn't be manipulated, something that would stand strong when others fall. Now you carry a strength that wasn't born from ease, it was born from fire. You've been through the worst and come out wiser, stronger, and more grounded in your identity. That's why it wasn't punishment, it was preparation. God used what was meant to harm you to elevate you. And even though it hurt, it produced a version of you that hell itself is terrified of. You weren't placed in the narcissist's life to be controlled. You were placed there to confront a cycle that's been running unchecked for far too long. Your presence wasn't random, it was strategic. God saw the patterns, the generational dysfunction, the manipulation that had been operating under the radar, and He sent you as a divine disruption. It wasn't just about your healing. It was about what He wanted to break through you. Because sometimes the only way to expose darkness is to introduce light. And the moment you walked into that space, things started to shift. Not because you said anything, but because your spirit carried what their system couldn't tolerate: truth, clarity, and freedom. The narcissist didn't just see you as another person. They saw something in you that threatened the entire structure they built their identity on. They saw someone they couldn't easily control, someone whose heart didn't bend under pressure, someone who loved deeply but wouldn't surrender their soul. You confused them, you frustrated them, because they were used to people shrinking to keep the peace. But you did not forever, and when you finally stood your ground, they didn't know what to do with you. Because your presence wasn't feeding their ego, it was challenging their authority. This wasn't just a relationship problem, it was a spiritual confrontation. You were confronting a spirit that manipulates, distorts, deceives, and dominates. And when you started to push back, not with anger, but with truth, they felt it. They felt the loss of control. They felt their mask slipping. They felt the exposure that your authenticity brought, because narcissists thrive in places where silence is normal, where pretending is praised, and where truth is inconvenient. But you weren't wired to play that game, and even though you tried for a while, tried to be what they wanted, tried to keep things smooth, there came a moment when God opened your eyes. That moment was the beginning of a divine confrontation. Your healing started to threaten their manipulation. Your boundaries started to dismantle their control, and your refusal to play along became the loudest protest of all. You were breaking something they had worked hard to protect. And make no mistake, you weren't just confronting them. You were confronting every lie they believed about love, power, and identity. You were showing them, without even trying, that there's another way to live, another way to love, another way to exist that doesn't require stepping on others to feel powerful. But here's the hard part. Not everyone wants to be free. Some people love their chains. Some people are addicted to the illusion of control. And when you refuse to play the role they had scripted for you, they tried to tear you down. That's what narcissists do when they lose control. They slander, they lie, they twist stories, because they can't afford for the truth to come out. But even in that, God was using you because your resistance was exposing them. Your presence was pulling back the curtain, and while they were busy trying to destroy your reputation, God was preserving your assignment. You were never sent there to blend in. You were sent there to interrupt, to disrupt, to shine. And even though it cost you something, your peace, your time, your tears, it wasn't wasted. God used every part of it to position you for purpose, because the cycle had to stop somewhere. And God chose you to be the one who said no more. You weren't just in the narcissist's life for them to change. You were there to change the spiritual climate. You were there to carry truth where lies had reigned. And even if they never acknowledge it, you were the shift, the confrontation, the divine disruption that changed everything. Pain is a forge. It's the heat that reveals what you're really made of. And when you were thrown into that relationship or environment with a narcissist, it didn't feel like growth. It felt like devastation. Every day you were questioned, doubted, twisted, and torn. You second-guessed your instincts. You shrank your voice. You tried to become smaller just to survive. But in the middle of that pressure, something was happening beneath the surface. What looked like breaking was actually becoming. Every insult, every silent treatment, every gaslighting moment became fire that burned away false identities and woke up your true self. You see, God never wastes pain. He doesn't allow you to walk through the fire for no reason. The enemy may have sent that narcissist to destroy you, but God used it to develop you, because purpose is always born through process, and process requires pressure. The version of you that God is calling into purpose can't afford to be fragile, unsure, or dependent on external validation. The process had to stretch you, test you, and expose the weak places so they could be fortified by. That narcissist wasn't just a tormentor, they became an unexpected teacher. Not because they spoke truth, but because their lies pushed you to seek it. You started to learn that peace isn't found in pleasing others, it's found in protecting your soul. You learned that real love doesn't demand the death of your identity. You discovered the strength of silence, the power of walking away, and the authority of your no. That didn't come from reading books. It came from walking through emotional warfare and coming out the other side wiser, not bitter. The pain sharpened your instincts. It increased your discernment. It pushed you closer to God because no one else could understand the depth of what you were feeling. In that wilderness, God became your anchor. While the narcissist played mind games, God was steady. While your emotions spiraled, His truth stayed firm. And even though you felt like you were losing your mind, you were actually gaining vision. You were starting to see what you had never seen before. The manipulation, the patterns, the red flags that once confused you now became clear. What once overwhelmed you now empowers you, because pain stripped away the illusion. You stopped giving your power away. You stopped justifying dysfunction. You stopped making excuses for behavior that was slowly killing your spirit. That was the moment you stopped surviving and started becoming. The pain didn't kill you. It revealed you. It showed you what matters. It reminded you of your worth. It taught you how to stand when everything around you is trying to pull you down. And now, because of what you walked through, you carry something unshakable. Wisdom isn't something you can fake. And you carry real wisdom now. You've been to the depths. You've cried prayers that didn't have words. You've fought battles no one else saw. And you didn't just make it out. You came out with fire in your eyes and purpose in your stride. You see, now that pain was never the end. It was the beginning of a deeper transformation. You weren't being buried, you were being planted. And now that you've grown, the fruit of that growth is discernment, strength, boundaries, and clarity. What you once begged God to take away, you now thank Him for, because it changed everything. The narcissist meant it for evil, but God used it for your good. The forge didn't just refine you, it revealed the warrior you were always meant to become. You weren't just a victim in their story, you were the assignment. That truth shifts everything, because when you see yourself only as someone who was hurt, you feel powerless. But when you understand that God sent you into that narcissist's life with intention, it changes the narrative. You weren't just dragged into dysfunction, you were positioned in the middle of it for a reason. You were chosen to be the light in a place where darkness had been ruling for years. You were assigned to carry truth where lies had been breeding. You were placed there not because you were weak, but because God saw something in you that was ready to fight for freedom even when you didn't know it yet. The enemy didn't expect you to rise. He thought you'd be another casualty, another person silenced, another soul broken and discarded. But heaven had other plans. What the narcissist used to try to dismantle your identity only revealed the depth of your purpose. The warfare you faced wasn't proof of your failure. It was confirmation of your assignment, because the enemy doesn't fight what doesn't threaten him. You became a threat the moment you walked in with a heart that loved purely, with a soul that carried truth, and with a spirit that refused to bow. Yes, it hurt. You were lied to, manipulated, used, and devalued. You were accused of things you never did. You were blamed for things that weren't yours to carry. But even through that, you were growing. Slowly, quietly, powerfully. And while they thought they were wearing you down, they were actually training you to see. You began to recognize cycles. You started to hear the difference between real and fake apologies. You learned to stop trusting words and start watching patterns. You started to discern spirits, not just personalities. That wasn't random growth, that was divine training. And you may ask, why me? Why did I have to be the one to go through it? Because you're the one God trusted to break the cycle. You're the one strong enough to endure and wise enough to heal. You're the one who wouldn't become what tried to break you. Others before you may have folded under that same weight. Some lost themselves. Some became like the very person who hurt them. But you chose a different path. Even when you were tempted to harden, you didn't. Even when you were tempted to hate, you fought to forgive. That's not weakness. That's spiritual strength. That's the kind of strength that shifts generations. You weren't placed in the narcissist's life to fix them. That was never your job. But you were placed there to reflect something they couldn't manipulate, something real, something grounded. And whether they changed or not isn't the point. What matters is that your presence created tension. It disrupted comfort. It stirred up exposure. Because when someone is used to living in a lie, truth always feels like an attack, and you carried truth in a way they couldn't ignore. So now when you look back, don't just see the pain, see the assignment. See the hand of God trusting you to stand in a place that needed light. You weren't just in their life for them to change. You were there so you could change too. So you could come out stronger. So you could come out wiser. So you could walk into your future with authority, clarity, and a story that sets others free. You weren't a victim, you were the assignment. And now you carry power that hell hoped you'd never discover. There was a time when you thought staying quiet was strength, when you believed that over-explaining would make things better, when you convinced yourself that loving harder would finally earn you peace, that if you just gave a little more, tolerated a little longer, stayed a little quieter, things would turn around. But they didn't. The narcissist didn't change. The cycles didn't stop. The confusion only grew. And yet something else was happening beneath that chaos. God was activating something in you that had been buried under years of people-pleasing and emotional exhaustion. He was awakening your discernment and unlocking your voice. It started slowly, a whisper inside that said, "This isn't love." A subtle discomfort when you ignored your own needs, a tug in your spirit when you made excuses for their behavior one more time. That wasn't just your gut. That was the Holy Spirit sharpening your discernment. Because God doesn't want you stuck in cycles that drain your soul. He wants you awake, aware, alive, and in order to get there, He had to allow you to walk through the very thing that would make you question everything, including yourself. That's where discernment is born, not in ease, but in chaos, not in peace, but in pressure. It was the emotional roller coaster that made you stop and say, something's not right here. That moment was divine. That awareness was sacred. It was the beginning of your awakening. For so long, your voice was buried, not just by the narcissist, but by fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood. So you stayed silent. You let things slide. You held back the truth to keep the peace. But it wasn't peace. It was quiet pain. And eventually that silence started to choke you until God said, speak. He didn't just want to heal your heart. He wanted to restore your voice, the voice that could say no more, the voice that could set boundaries without guilt, the voice that could walk away from dysfunction without apology. And when that voice came back, everything started to change. You stopped defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped justifying love that hurt more than it healed. You stopped explaining yourself to someone who never listened to begin with. You realize that validation from the wrong source is just another form of bondage, and you broke free. You didn't need their approval to feel valuable. You didn't need their agreement to know you were right. God was your witness, truth was your companion, and discernment became your armor. What once looked like weakness, your kindness, your empathy, your hope, was never weakness at all. The narcissist tried to weaponize those traits against you, but God reclaimed them. He turned your kindness into discernment, your empathy into wisdom, your hope into boundaries. You didn't lose who you were. You found out how to protect who you are. You learned that you could love people without losing yourself, that you could forgive without tolerating abuse, that you could walk away without needing a round of applause. Now you speak with authority. You walk with clarity. You carry a voice that has been tested by fire and refined by pain. And that voice, it carries power, it carries truth, it carries freedom. God didn't let the narcissist destroy you. He used them to develop what he always knew was inside you. You just needed the pressure to awaken it. You thought you were losing yourself, but you were really discovering your strength. And now, you don't just hear the lies, you see them before they even form. That's discernment. That's wisdom. That's a voice the enemy hoped would stay silent, but God said, speak, and you did. The moment you walked away, it looked like you lost. It looked like you gave up, like you failed, like the narcissist had the final word. They probably painted you as the villain, twisted the story, made sure others saw a version of events that made them look spotless and you look unstable. And for a while you might have believed it. You might have questioned your own memory, doubted your own emotions, and wondered if maybe you really were the problem. That's how deep the manipulation went. That's how skilled they were at rewriting reality. But God never left you in that confusion. He allowed the fog to settle just long enough for you to find your footing, and then he began to restore clarity. Walking away wasn't your loss, it was your deliverance. Because sometimes God doesn't rescue you in the relationship, he rescues you from it. You weren't weak for leaving, you were wise. You weren't broken for giving up the fight. You were finally strong enough to stop fighting for something that was costing you your soul. And as you walked away, even when you felt shattered, even when the silence screamed and the guilt crept in, God was walking right beside you. Every step you took away from that dysfunction was a step toward healing, peace, and purpose. It didn't happen overnight. Healing never does. There were days you missed the chaos, not because it was good, but because it was familiar. There were nights you replayed every conversation in your head, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. There were moments you almost went back because the pain of rebuilding felt heavier than the pain of staying. But each time God reminded you, you didn't walk away to escape. You walked away to become whole, to become clear, to become the version of yourself that no longer needs to earn love or explain pain. The narcissist thought you leaving was a sign they had won, that their control was complete, that their narrative would define you forever. But what they didn't see, what they couldn't see, was what God was doing behind the scenes. He was healing you in layers. He was rebuilding your voice, your confidence, your ability to trust yourself again. He was restoring the parts of you that had been fractured by the constant pressure to please, to fix, to perform. And in that quiet season, when no one was applauding, when no one was watching, you were being reintroduced to yourself. That healing wasn't just for you, it was for the people coming behind you. Because now you can spot manipulation in its earliest form. Now you can walk away from red flags without needing a long explanation. Now you trust your discernment more than you trust someone's charm. That's not just growth, that's spiritual maturity. That's the kind of inner strength God needed to build in you, not just so you'd survive the last season, but so you'd thrive in the next one. The narcissist didn't get the last word, God did. And his word over you is not broken, not discarded, not forgotten. It's chosen, it's healed, it's sent. You didn't lose, you won. You gained freedom, you gained clarity, you gained peace that doesn't need to be earned, and love that doesn't demand your silence. You walked away, but you walked into something far greater. A life aligned with truth, a heart aligned with heaven, and a future that no narcissist can touch. That's not weakness. That's victory, and you carry that victory with every step you take forward, never looking back.